They called them the Lost Kindred, once a proud civilization known as the Erithi, now reduced to scattered refugee camps orbiting the burnt husks of moons and derelict space stations. Once holders of knowledge older than most star empires, they had fallen, first to betrayal, then to fire, then to silence. The Galactic Coalition, a 1,000-species alliance of supposed protectors, turned away from them in their hour of need. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't politics. It was cowardice. The Sarkin Reavers had descended with cruelty perfected over centuries, and the Coalition had watched, whispered condolences, and turned their ships away. When the Erithi Council sent out desperate signals for asylum, no world responded. The Archivans refused them on grounds of biocompatibility. The Kralda claimed humanitarian overload. The Varuni simply didn't answer. In less than a cycle, the Erithi homeworld burned, their fleet scattered, and their survivors became shadows. And just as hope frayed into extinction, one signal pierced the void, transmitted from the blue planet on the spiral's edge. It was short. It was human. It said, "We heard you. Help is on the way." Aboard the Goliath-class human, relief cruiser Horizon Flame, Captain Juno Harker stared at the request log glowing on her console. She'd volunteered the moment she saw the Erithi code. Most of her bridge crew were skeptical. The Erithi? Commander Jamal muttered. Weren't they the ones who refused us entry into Coalition Science Councils for a decade? They were, Juno replied coldly. But we're not them. Across the galaxy, the idea of helping the Erithi had become a joke, a tragic irony. Aid was considered a waste. They had their time, the Archivan said. Let the galaxy move on, the Varuni hissed. But Earth Command had remembered something. A brief exchange centuries ago when the Erithi gifted Earth early data on quantum subfold drive design. Without that, Earth wouldn't have reached the stars before burning itself apart. We pay our debts, said the Earth Prime Council, even when no one else does. So the Horizon Flame wasn't alone. 16 vessels of the Human Alliance Aid Division, cargo carriers, hospital ships, terraforming tugs, and 2 fully armed dreadnoughts pierced the galactic veil, entering the ruined remains of the Erithi system. They arrived like thunder on wings of mercy, bearing food, medical personnel, translators, atmosphere scrubbers, and a promise. The Erithi refugees wept openly when they saw the ships descend. The first landing happened at Omega Station 12, a decaying orbital hub kept alive by barely functioning AI. Captain Juno walked among the skeletal remains of a proud culture. The Erithi survivors were thin, eyes dulled by hunger, skin marked with soot and radiation. Their leaders could barely speak. The last High Elder, Syrian Val, limped forward, supported by 2 aides. You came, he rasped. Juno removed her helmet and stepped forward, extending her hand. We're here now. You're not alone anymore. Val's lip trembled. He fell to his knees. 3 weeks into the relief mission, other species began noticing. Archiving scouts monitored from deep space. The Kralda sent sanitized condolences. The Varuni media mocked humanity's emotional inefficiency. But then something happened that none expected. The Reavers returned. They came not to conquer. They believed the system finished, but to scavenge, kill, and erase what little hope remained. A fleet of 20 ships burst from subspace on the edge of the Keplorian Drift, descending toward the largest Erithi shelter moon. They laughed on open comms. Still some meat left after all. The Erithi screamed. Their shelters weren't shielded. Their orbit defenses had long died. And though humanity had brought medicine and food, it hadn't deployed its fleets in full. Until then, on board the Dreadnought Bastion's Oath, Rear Admiral Clayton Thorne didn't wait for orders. He stared at the sensor feed, then keyed the command line. Defensive posture, full. The sky around the Erithi shimmered. Human ships unmasked themselves from low orbit. Stealth cruisers, Aegis-class destroyers, and Earth's new prototype. The Solaris Lancer, a beam-capable AI-coordinated warship that had never been tested in combat. When the Reavers locked weapons, they expected panic. Instead, they heard a voice. This is Rear Admiral Thorne of the United Human Alliance. You have violated protected space under humanitarian aid operation. Leave immediately or be fired upon. The Reaver leader, Captain H Verwin, barked laughter. Humans? Protecting the Erithi? We'll gut you both. They launched torpedoes. Thorn watched them come. Then Earth's fleet answered. The Solaris Lancer spun mid-axis, fired a solar beam that cleaved the leading Reaver vessel in half, detonating its antimatter drive in an explosion visible from the moons. Human destroyers moved like wolves, coordinated, swift, terrifying. In 7 minutes, the Reaver fleet ceased to exist. 5 ships were vaporized, 6 disabled. The rest turned and ran, bleeding oil and static into the stars. It was the fastest known defeat of a Reaver raid in recorded history. The galaxy couldn't ignore it anymore. News feeds across species lit up. Humans defend forgotten species. Reavers destroy protecting a dying race. Erithi refugees under human shield. Coalition officials scrambled. Archivans called for review. The crawler demanded a humanitarian audit. Even the Varuni ambassador, known for disdain of lesser races, issued a public statement. Perhaps the Erithis still serve purpose. But Earth didn't care. Juno stood beside Elderval as they watched clean water systems installed for the first time in decades. Human engineers taught Erithi children how to use carbon filters, how to rebuild, how to reclaim soil and air. Val turned to her. Why? We gave you no love, no support. We shut you out. Juno smiled faintly. We're human. That's what we do. They kept building. Terraforming teams restored the moons. Ancient Erithi temples were excavated. Human scholars translated lost Erithi texts and fed them into the Galactic Library. The greatest moment came when the first Erithi child born in 20 years took her first breath on a restored station under Earth's protective field. They named her Soraya Harker after the captain. But not everyone was happy. The Varuni launched a political maneuver, accusing Earth of militarized compassion. They feared Earth was gaining cultural influence by resurrecting a species everyone else abandoned. And perhaps they were right. But no amount of fear could stop what came next. The Erithi, once a species of silence, stood before the coalition assembly after 30 years in exile. Elder Val, now aged and carried in a hoverchair, spoke through a voice amplifier. None of you came. None of you helped. But one did. Humanity. They gave us medicine, shielded us from death, helped us rebuild our history. You call them emotional. We call them kin. From this day, the Erithi bind ourselves to Earth as allies, defenders, and family. And then, something unseen in coalition memory. Val raised his trembling hand. Dozens of Erithi behind him dropped to one knee, fists crossed in the human military salute. The coalition assembly sat in stunned silence. Earth's ambassador, a woman named Natalia Voss, stood slowly and gave a single nod. We accept. Across the stars, abandoned species whispered. The Flarn, forgotten on ice worlds. The Crixie, driven underground by chemical war. Even minor human colonies, long dismissed, rallied under new banner, the Pact of the Forgotten. Earth led the charge, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The motto they engraved across their relief cruisers, their aid ships, their school worlds, their shields? Not on our time. Because when the stars turned cold, when the proud hid behind treaties, when old alliances rotted into dust, only one race stepped forward, not because they were asked, but because they chose to. Because humans, flawed, fierce, stubborn, and irrational, remembered something the others forgot. That mercy isn't weakness. That kindness isn't inefficiency. That some debts are paid not because they're owed, but because it's right. And when the universe watches a species rise from ash, rebuilt by the hands of those they once rejected, it remembers. Because in the void of silence, when every race turned away, humanity said, not on our time,